Just 9 short days ago, we had what we thought was our end of the year finale, our winter finale. And I said, if you see us again before January 9th, then you know some shit went down. Well, apparently some shit went down because the Trump Report starts now.
You're tuning into the destination for TV superfan discussion, AFTERBUZZ TV. And now, let the buzz begin.
Wow, we're hearing this song for a much different reason than I think a lot of people thought we'd be hearing right now. But here's the thing, you live in Alabama, this is your life every day. It doesn't matter what's going on because their conscience doesn't bother them no matter what's going on. Welcome to a very special edition of the Trump Report. It's not just because it's a Thursday night, but just because we thought we were going to be off for a few weeks. And God, if we're back again after this, I mean, then I guess the impeachment hearings. I mean, I can only see that's the only reason why. But anyway, welcome, as I said, to the Trump Report. I'm Christian Bladt at ChristianDMZ, joined by Drexel Hurd of the Political Beat, which is still on break. So it didn't get that crazy. That Political Beat busted everything.
No. If you follow me on Twitter, then you know I was live tweeting, or at least trying to tweet out. But no Political Beat this week.
But that's all right, because you're here. We've got you here.
Mm-hmm.
And at the other end of the desk, the man with the numbers, Scott Moore, that's Man 80.
Hey guys.
I guess that's a place to start. And I don't need you to have exact totals and counts, but
I know he does.
Well, I know, but I'm sort of setting the audience up. Oh, and welcome to everybody in the chat who found us on a Thursday night. There was definitely some confusion. Sharable, Texas could not believe that we were doing a Thursday night,
and earlier too.
Lady Goth couldn't believe that we're even back at all. She's like, I thought the finale happened. There's a lot going on. But anyway,
it's a surprise and delight.
Yeah, sometimes
I love a good
sometimes you got to treat yourself.
Yeah.
That's right.
We're going to treat ourselves to a little extra Trump Report. There's one last one. So, Scott, let's talk a little bit about I would say that the word surprising isn't strong enough. The word shocking isn't strong enough. But Doug Jones' win over Roy Moore on Tuesday night in the Alabama special election, how close was it? It seemed to pull away a little bit more than I thought it was going to be, where it was originally like 0.7.
Yes.
And did you get a full point somewhere in that range?
He's almost like basically a 1.5 right now.
Wow.
Yes.
Which, when you consider that this is Alabama, that's like 10 points, right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Without getting into all the details of the number, just the top line general stuff that happened that worked in Doug Jones's favor, where when you look at the rural counties in Alabama, the numbers were substantially lower, and the rural counties were going to be more likely to vote for Roy Moore. The voters that had gone out to vote for Trump in those rural counties, they were way down for the special election. So what we really needed for Doug Jones to pull out a win is you needed those Republican voters to sit home to do a write-in candidate for another Republican, and for Democrats and African Americans to go out in huge numbers to vote for Doug Jones, and that's exactly what happened on Tuesday night. So rural voters were lower than last year when they voted for Trump, and the suburban vote for Republicans that are college educated in the suburbs around Birmingham, in Mobile, in Montgomery, in Tuscaloosa went out and actually voted pretty heavily also for Doug Jones. We saw a lot of crossover for those moderate Republicans, which he needed. And of course, we saw those huge numbers for African Americans. In some areas had 76% of turnout, which is just really impressive for a special election in some of those areas. So that all spelled the recipe to success for Doug Jones.
And Drexel, you were passing around a very helpful graphic that had things like, was it 97% of African American men voted for Doug Jones? Little things like that. You don't have to run through all those numbers.
98 for women and 93 for men, which is still huge.
What's going on with those? So it's 98 for women, 93. So what about those? What about those 5%?
The 2%, they can still come to the cookout if they bring a dish. We will help you. They might have gone into the sunken place at some point, but I think the other big number, because as Scott pointed out, the write-in candidate pulled in 20,000 votes.
Yes.
And which is very significant.
A significant number. And apparently there was a stealth campaign for a write-in candidate, and I believe the Alabama coach, the Crimson Tide coach, was that third. Was that third
I did
place?
see it was Nick Saban.
Nick Saban, yeah.
Well, yeah, was that third place winner? So But at the same time, the other number that people have to should be troubling to Republicans and should be troubling to Donald Trump is that his approval rating in Alabama was tied at 48-48, and that, I mean, Alabama is basically one of the reddest states.
Yes, the
in
third
the union.
most that voted for Trump last year. That had the third highest total.
And so if you're looking at those numbers, you're like, well, Doug Jones. If you look at Alabama as 48-48, the rest of the nation, that should give you an indication as to what the rest of the nation is. And you know, like you said, African Americans just came out to vote, and I know like somebody like the crazy Bill Mitchell. You ever see Bill Mitchell? Like I don't follow him, but like he pops up every once in a while because people like tweet at him because he's crazy.
Yes, he is.
Said something crazy. Like, "Oh, well, I saw that people were busting African Americans over from Mississippi." Now, if you don't think that Alabama locked down their voting apparatus to keep people from voting illegally, then you're mistaken. And you know, I said it on Hellbent. I was on Hellbent podcast today, the feminist podcast. So definitely check it out because Neera Tandon.
Find that?
It's on iTunes. You can find. But Neera Tandon was the guest on it, and so she was on before I got on there. But you know that people have to. What was I talking about?
Just the Bill Mitchell and the busing people over, which was a ridiculous tweet that he put out there.
And so like African Americans like voted in Birmingham with the mayoral race that happened a few weeks ago in droves. And if that was any indication of what was going to happen in this special election, then Republicans were not paying enough attention to what was happening in Birmingham.
Absolutely.
Which I think maybe they were not. I found that graphic that Drexel texted to us, and I was not smart enough to send it to our friend Anthony in the booth so we could share it. But I do want to mention sort of the least surprising number from that tally, which is the percentage of white men who voted for Roy Moore. Well, it's a little surprising because it's 74%. That means 26% of white men voted. Well,
voted for
23 for Jones and 3% no answer. So some of those might have been write-ins for Nick Saban, maybe you know, Colonel Sanders. I know that's Kentucky, but you know, obviously he's well appreciated there. So yeah, I mean, it's definitely a clear breakdown. And Drexel, you sort of touched on it, but the idea that do you think we would have this sort of African American turnout on a regular basis? I'm not specifically saying in the state of Alabama, but would we have this kind of turnout if, you know, maybe there weren't some tactics at the polling places keeping them away? I mean, do you think this percentage try to come out and are, you know, turned away or discouraged from voting in other ways? You know, like there'll be mailers that say that the election is on a different date than the date it actually is to try and confuse people.
Well, those things happened that day in Alabama. If you're looking at reports, those things, people were getting text messages saying that their polling places had changed. Earlier that day also, the Alabama Supreme Court had struck down the lower court's ruling in Alabama on preserving the electronic voting ballot so that they could, it actually would not help Roy. In a recount, it probably would have helped Roy more, but the Alabama Supreme Court. So those were tactics that the Republican-led Alabama Supreme Court, the Republican Party, tried to deploy. On the other side of that, the DNC pumped $1 million that nobody knew about into targeting African American communities and millennials in Alabama and making sure that they got out to vote and that they were prepared for that. One thing that, you know, that I'll say, and I'm sure that Chelsea would disagree with me, being as far up Bernie's ass as the next person.
Wow.
But the backbone of the Democratic Party is obviously African Americans. It is not It is not working class Democrats.
Absolutely.
But with that said, people look at the term working class Democrats and just assume white voters. Black voters are the working class,
right? And Latino voters, and a lot of people are part of that working class.
And so, and there's a reason why black voters did not latch on to Bernie Sanders is because he was not talking about black working class voters. And we saw it is no secret that black folks have kept the Democratic Party alive. And it is a survival tactic at this point. If black people came out in droves, to answer your question, because somebody had to save the party. And typically, like Barack Obama came and saved America to an extent, black voters had to come in and save Alabama.
And they did. And they absolutely did. If it was
Right.
not for them, because the white people were very embarrassing with their numbers for Roy
Right.
Moore. We need to have a moment with that they need to come to understand that they all voted for Roy Moore, which is a pretty scary thing. And the other thing that you were going to mention, too, is like you said, it should also scare Republicans is seeing the trend, like you said, from millennials, from anyone younger than 65, how as you got progressively younger, the votes for Doug Jones increased till you got to around 18 to 39, and you had over 70% of that age group voting for Doug Jones as opposed to Roy Moore. So that also is a scary tactic for Republicans, knowing that their base is shrinking and dying out, and the younger generation, whites included, is definitely more progressive in voting in droves too for Democratic candidates.
The other part of that is that you talked about the white vote. Roy Moore also won white educated college women as well. So that it is, and I said this on the podcast earlier today, which was it's a fundamental thing when it comes to white women and white voters. We're never going to be able to tell white women that, or at least in the South, that they need to change their mentality on what the roles are of a woman. So we got to get past that piece of. We got to get past of trying to convince white women that, and especially in the South, that their role is not to be beside their man instead of being a part of a great partner in moving things forward. And so you got to talk about, we got to find another way to get into that, because if Roy Moore, after all the allegations that came out about him, Donald Trump, all the allegations that came out about him, those were the big chunks of voters last year, and those are the big chunks of voters for Roy Moore as well. I mean, the fact that it was as high, white men, yeah, that's fine, but it was as high as for white women across the board, educated and uneducated, is a problem.
One of the things that obviously I think led to the showing that Roy Moore had is people didn't know what to make of the allegations, or the fact that they don't trust where the allegations came from. And somebody that I know reasonably well, I actually had a conversation on Facebook, and what he said was, I'm still waiting to see those allegations proven. If he's guilty, I want to know. I just can't make logical sense of how he's run for office multiple times, and suddenly this year the accusers speak up. And I mention it because I feel like that's representative of what a lot of people thought. It's like, I've heard it. Everybody's heard these. They aren't even saying that. I don't know that for sure that it didn't happen, but I also don't know that it did happen. There's not enough time to figure it out. And I think that's what it came down to, is that the people that voted for him. But I think ultimately there was enough people that had doubt that either, like you said, they didn't, they stayed home. They voted for Nick Saban. Maybe some of them voted for Doug Jones, but I think that there are definitely people that weren't going to vote for him no matter what. Right. But they just couldn't bring themselves to vote for Roy Moore. But the contingent that he had, of course, was diehard, and there could have been video of him, murdering 10 people, and be like, yeah, but he's our guy,
Right.
Don't tell us how to vote.
Vice did a whole thing where they brought in Republican or Roy Moore supporters, and they talked about that, and they talked about George Soros and being paid off, and how many people in the room thought they were being paid, and it was a little crazy. It was a little like disappointing to watch. It was a little saddening to watch that conversation happen. But I don't know. Roy Moore, he was destined to lose. It was his to lose for sure.
It was, and that's sort of the the post-mortem for a lot of Republicans, like, well, he's a flawed candidate, and he wasn't really supposed to win anyways, and the fact that it was that close, so that was sort of their pivot the next day. But you still have to think, I mean, I was convinced all the way up to the end, and I know you were too, Christian, that there was no way that a Democrat was still going to eke out a win, and at the amount that he did at 1.5%. I mean, even after
above
the recount threshold.
The AP initially reported it, I still was like, okay, but and then especially you see okay, it's close. It's a bold thing to declare. But I still felt like it was going to swing back the other way. I was very surprised.
See, I didn't feel like that
because you still have faith in
I did later
condition.
When I saw the numbers
Scott
come
and I
in.
are very cynical.
I am, and I thought, once the RNC had sort of started to invest back their money, and Donald Trump did his full-throated endorsement, and I knew that Donald Trump had done well in Alabama, I started thinking, well, maybe some of those people who were on the fence about voting for Roy Moore now feel more comfortable doing so, and that it was going to make it so it was at least very close. And you know, you had the governor there who was a woman who said she was still voting for him, and that basically you need a Republican there for the votes and that
the
sort of thing.
Republican Party of Alabama saying if you don't support Roy Moore, then you will have no chance of running in Alabama. And now all those people have egg on their face.
They do, but I really thought because those people were there that it was going to give the people that were concerned about voting the leeway to do so. So I was still surprised, and then thinking it had been a quarter century since, coincidentally enough, Richard Shelby, the senior senator from Alabama, was last elected statewide as a Democrat, who then has, of course, now switched parties to Republican. But he was the last one elected statewide, and was back in the early 90s. So to me, it was something that was pretty unprecedented and still surprising and pretty incredible and awesome to witness.
Well, let's talk a little bit about the big losers on the night. Obviously, you have to start with Roy Moore, although he has still not conceded as of right now. And I feel like he's never going to concede. You know, he might just go away. You know, maybe he'll go to another county where there's a mall. He's allowed to hang out at the food court.
or take Sassy out to the next county, and where he's free to.
Which I believe he lost that county. That the mall.
Yes,
that he's
he did.
in
Gadsden. Yep.
Doug Jones pulled like 77% in that county or something.
They know him.
Because Doug could go to the mall and shake hands. That made all the
in Gadsden,
difference.
Alabama, yes.
And
they know him well enough to know not to vote for him.
The New York Daily News had a great headline, speaking of Sassy, by the way, which was, you know, they couldn't say "fuck you" and the horse you rode in on, but it basically was Roy Moore and the horse he rode in on, which is sort of the parenthetical title of this episode. You know, Sweet Home Alabama. Yeah, I mean, it's just like it was just such a great moment. It was like, oh, literally, and the horse he rode in on. But he hasn't conceded. But at the same time, it didn't get close enough where it was an automatic recount, which I think was what he was initially counting on. Scott, any theory on what he's waiting for? I mean, other than God to tell him that he did win?
I think, he's waiting for God to tell him, or God to somehow change the results, because as it being a federal office holder position, he can't even pay for the recount now, because state rules are different, but for the federal, it's like unless it's 0.5 or different, then there would be a recount, and that would be available. But he's 3 times over that threshold, and for federal office holders, there will not be a recount for that. So,
and the Secretary of State of Alabama has already said that there's already been a recount. Donald Trump has already called Doug Jones to congratulate him. I mean,
more importantly than that, he tweeted congratulations to Doug Jones.
Well, I don't know if it was really him. I had my doubts for that.
His account tweeted.
It was definitely a little too grammatically correct for Donald Trump to have tweeted it.
Too like kind of nice, but that they were trying to be Trump-esque at the end with that, and I was like, I don't think it's him.
But yeah, the Secretary of State's already kind of declared that. But the Republicans, Mitch McConnell, not wanting to seat. The hypocrisy of the Republican Party is really crazy to me.
Yeah, seriously.
Like every time I think about it, I'm like, what in the world? From Roy Moore, and then them being like, well, look at Al Franken, and then for them to go back and say, but let's support Roy Moore. It's like really crazy. For Mitch McConnell to come out and say, well, you know, you should seat our guy in 2010 and Scott Brown, the Democrats doing that, and then coming back 7 years later to say we're not going to seat your guy because why? We want to get our tax bill
done. Yep. But yet the Democrats waited for Scott Brown in Massachusetts to be seated.
Even Harry Reid said we will not do any work. Harry Reid said we will not do any work in the Senate until Scott Brown is seated. And if that does not show listeners and viewers the heart of the Republican Party, then I don't know what will.
Right.
Also, big loser. On this race as a whole has not gone well for President Trump. He endorsed Luther Strange.
Yep.
And then he's got on board the Moore train. Then he backed out. He backed away from the Moore train. He pulled it out of the station. And then he was all in the last few days. And yeah, that was the one little glimmer that like, oh wait, maybe there's like a serious chance if Trump has to actually go all in on this guy. And I mean, the next morning he tweets, or as Scott alluded to, someone with access to @real Donald Trump tweeted
Scavino,
congratulations to Doug Jones.
Ivanka.
Yeah, could be Ivanka. She just figured out his password. Is really all it was. I believe the password is boobs.
Trump.
Boobs 1 2 3, or Trump. Synonym. But I don't know. I mean, I think look. I mean, nothing really sticks to Trump long term, but it has to be infuriating to him that he got involved, and even he knows that he looks worse for endorsing this guy. If they had won, it's like, well, look, I had to. And I don't know. I mean, I don't think he's the biggest loser. The biggest loser is clearly Roy Moore.
But he's really pretty close to that, because if you look back at all of his last couple endorsements, again, he went all in for Ed Gillespie in Virginia for governor, who lost by huge numbers. Like you said, he went in for Luther Strange in the primary, lost. Then he jumped aboard with Roy, and now he lost that as well. So he does not have a good streak going with endorsements, and it also proves that he doesn't carry any coattails for anybody. And again, that should make Republicans nervous going into 2018, knowing that they have absolutely nothing to benefit by working with him, because he's not going to help carry them over the finish line by any chance. If you can't pull out a victory in Alabama, then you do have serious problems as a party to head into the midterms next year.
I'll also point out the fact I think that Donald Trump is a loser of the night, and just in general. But I think the biggest loser of the night, other than Roy Moore, is Steve Bannon.
Exactly who I was going to move on to.
Right.
Because when we talked about it last week, we talked about getting these endorsements, and I'm like, I don't know how much that helps Roy Moore.
Right.
I mean, I guess there's a big cross section of the same people.
But it wasn't even an endorsement. Roy Moore was a Steve Bannon pick.
Yep.
Yeah.
So and this might shock some viewers, at least in terms of what I'll say about Donald Trump, which is Donald Trump, I don't think ever picked Roy Moore. Donald Trump
he
picked
didn't.
Luther Strange.
He did.
And so if you look at how Roy Moore campaigned, how Ed Gillespie campaigned, they were somewhat similar in their fear tactics. Luther Strange never really did that. The tactics of Moore and Gillespie were Bannon-esque. The tactics of Strange tended to be, while Trump is still
more,
right.
yes.
While Trump uses a little bit of fear tactics, he's not as crazy as Steve Bannon, who helped him use those tactics during the campaign. So I would look at it and go, Donald Trump lost the battle with Luther Strange, but Steve Bannon lost the war with his candidates, and those are the coattails that now Steve Bannon probably has to go away.
Right. No, I think you're right. That it definitely is Steve Bannon. I only brought up Trump with the fact that the sitting president, who did endorse these people, did not provide that extra over the finish line help, and that it makes that sitting president and the party that he leads bad. But yes, it definitely weakens Bannon as well.
Hopefully he doesn't take Bannon's advice going forward. Hopefully not. I think from a I said it's this thing. If John Kelly got rid of Stephen Miller, like he got rid of Steve Bannon, the White House would normalize just slightly. Because Stephen Miller is the policy person, and he's pushing all these crazy things, and that's what's making the White House look crazy. And so if he leaves, I would say that the White House would have some chance of normalcy in terms of messaging. But right now, that's not the case.
Well, except for the Twitter, though. I don't know if that's ever going to go away.
No, the Twitter
that's
never
the problem.
I'm in policy.
Yes, as far as the cohesiveness of that, but you have a person who can't help himself on Twitter that...
Yeah, but the point about Bannon is that even he initially was, he had kind of backed away from Roy Moore as well, and then again went all in, and it didn't help. And yeah, I think it brings up questions as to how viable is. His tactics could still be very effective, but the face of Steve Bannon, I don't know how much that helps you, in 2018, having him actually at your events, even in some of the most rural areas of the country. I don't know how much he helps.
And we've never seen a strategist out like that before, ever. As far as I can remember, Karl Rove never went out like that.
Right.
I don't know that Democrats have a strategist like that.
Yeah, because you'll have like your Carvilles and retired guys,
right. But those people aren't like shaping huge things like Karl Rove did and like Steve Bannon did, where Republicans answer to one person. Republicans always answered to Karl Rove. Republicans always answered to Steve Bannon during the campaign, and Democrats have never been like that. And so I guess that's going to be a little learning lesson for Republicans going forward, to the point where Ronna Ronna,
Yes.
what's her name?
Yes,
Ronna
Romney, yeah.
Romney McDaniel,
yeah.
RNC chair.
Yeah.
Like, for her as a woman to have taken this party out, taken the party apparatus out of Roy Moore to put him back in, like, what was going through her head? And what's going through her head now? And what is Mitt Romney over there saying to her?
Well,
like,
half of the tweets that she also posts are just crazy as well. Where I'm
yeah,
like,
she's
I'm like,
Well,
you.
The morning after seemed to be the time to really lean into Roy Moore, but also to Steve Bannon. I love that Representative Peter King of New York could not resist talking about how he looked like a drunk. He's like, I didn't say he was a drunk. I just said he looked like one. And, you know, I mean, I think that... Yeah, I think that, look, all of this is very indicative. Now, the real question is, what exactly is Doug Jones going to be able to accomplish? You know, I mean, he won't be seated for a month, and I guess we're going to get the tax bill squeezed through.
I don't know.
Simple question
either.
For you, Scott, before we actually talk about the tax bill. Will the composition of the Senate be 50-50, or are there other changes, or... You know, I mean, Pence would still be the tiebreaker, right?
He'd still be the tiebreaker, yeah.
So it doesn't really change anything, right?
Well, I mean, it does change the fact that you have now one less Republican that's going to be voting with
So
you.
you have 50-50 with Pence, the
51-49 will be the new composition because you've got the two independents that caucus, like Bernie Sanders and Angus King in Maine, that caucus with the Democrats. So you've got 49-51. So that really only means that you can only lose 2 Republican votes now instead of 3. So that makes it a lot tighter now for anything that they're going to be trying to do in the next year.
And what they're really focused on, as we heard about today, is that, you know, the House has tried to reconcile the tax bill, and I guess they're really doing their part to try and get this voted on before Doug Jones gets sworn in, which to that guy from Roy Moore's campaign, if we all saw the video of him talking to Jake Tapper, he could get sworn in on the phone book. He could get sworn in on a Harry Potter book.
Exactly.
He could get sworn in on no book. You know, it does not have to be the Christian Bible. That's one of my favorite videos.
That was
in a long
fantastic,
time.
yes.
Just because of how how long the guy was dumbfounded is what made it feel
Yes,
like an
it was.
SNL
It was
sketch.
great. Like, he did not know how to answer. I was like, is this real?
Yeah, he's like, he's like, yeah, but I swore on the Bible. I was like, I'm sure you did.
Right.
But you know, by the way, I would be sworn in on a Klingon dictionary in case anybody ever wanted to know what my book of choice would be. But you know, there's obviously a lot of questions because now the spotlight is that much closer on all of these senators. And, you know, we are starting to hear things like apparently Senator McCain's health is not even as good as we thought it was a month ago. So...
That Cochran also, I heard today, is also in ill health, and you have Marco Rubio who said he's going to vote no.
But you know Marco Rubio has no backbone.
No, I know. But you think about that and the Bob Corker, and you think if Susan Collins comes back on the other side. Like, there's a lot of people Jeff Flake, for sure. Like, there's a lot of people where it's very easy to lose those people, and you're not going to get it done in time by the end of the year, and therefore you have a new Democratic senator that's going to make it even harder to get these things passed.
And the longer that they go... with the longer that they get, like, people are going to be paying a little bit more attention now because net neutrality is kind of out of the way.
Yes.
So their focus can be on this tax bill. But to your point, listen, I don't know if John McCain's at Walter Reed right now. The chances of him, at least, we're hoping that he pulls through what he's dealing with right now, but the chances of coming back to vote are pretty slim right now. So that brings it down. It looks like Bob Corker's a no. So that brings it down to 40. That brings it down.
That's 2 down.
Yeah.
That's 2 down. I mean,
so you have 52 right now.
So, 52,
that's 50.
Right.
So all you really need is one more to break away, and then
if Susan Collins doesn't get what she wants, then you know, there's that. And then Marco Rubio talking about adding more money in for poor people. You know, the Freedom Caucus doesn't like poor people, so they don't care. So you know, just getting that through the it'll get through the House. The other part of that is Paul Ryan
Yes, which
the
is our next
rumors.
topic.
is looking at not running for is looking at retiring. I don't know whatever
Yeah,
that
retiring.
means. He's like what 45,
Yeah.
like retiring.
Well, I mean, to me, the only reason Paul Ryan retires is because he wants to run for president. But I feel like even he knows that you have to have some semblance of a personality to run for president. You know, I mean, he has to have seen the vice presidential debate that he was in. You know, so I think he should know what his own limitations would be as a presidential candidate. So maybe it's just he's had enough.
Right, but we
I
know
mean,
his-
the first thought I had is like, oh my God, is he going to run for president?
No, but I mean, we know that the only reason he wanted to be a United States congressman was to do the tax bill.
Yes.
So
And the health
if he
and
doesn't
welfare
get
and
that
all
through,
Yeah.
if this doesn't go through,
Yeah.
Yeah.
there's two things that'll happen. He'll lose the Wisconsin election to Randy Bryce. And we'll start to, and it's a good chance he'll lose that election. So he might be calculating that
Love the
piece
Iron
in.
Stash. I'd love for
Right.
him to beat Ryan. That would be beautiful.
I think that's another
I don't know.
calculation that Paul Ryan's making is there's a good chance that he might lose, and that is not a position that he
Right.
would really want to end his run as Speaker of the House
Exactly.
on is losing a race. And
Well,
he
sort of
wants to
like
go
he
out
saw
race
what
first.
happened with seeing Air Cantor lose in a primary, a couple years ago. But that's the same thing that I always feel would happen with Trump as well. That even if he, and I still don't think he will be, but even if he is eligible to run again for re-election, if he knows that he's going to lose, he will find an excuse to not run because he would rather not walk
lose.
out as a loser. In all sense of the word, and so he would rather not run again and then blame everybody else for not letting him, do what he needed to do. And that's sort of the same tactic I kind of saw with Paul Ryan, unless he has something else that he's planning on doing, some kind of thing or something else that he's
Paul Ryan is about
P90X spokesperson. I don't know.
Keg stand classes. I
And
think-
Rand classes for
Right.
everybody. I don't know.
I think Paul Ryan is going to ride off into the sunset with a lot of money from a lot of corporations that lobbied him on this tax bill. So I think that that's something that Wisconsin voters are going to have to remember going into 2018 if he decides to run for re-election, and that the American people are going to have to realize when they go to the polls about Republicans in general about letting a tax bill like this through. So.
Absolutely.
Well, it's all interesting things to keep an eye on, and one of the things that you referenced, Drexel, is net neutrality. So what exactly is this going to mean? Because I don't know if Drexel was on the panel the night that we talked about it. It's like I still never got what it was. I mean, I understood how it was supposed to be bad, but then there were arguments being made in the other case. So let me ask you, Scott, what does this actually mean? What happened today?
Well, for the exact moment, it's not going to change much. But the first thing that it means is that companies can now basically charge Netflix and other streaming services rates that are higher or lower to be, however they feel that they want to do it now, to be on their fast lanes. And these charges could then be passed along as to consumers, much like you get on a cable bill, like you can get this package, you can get that package, you can get this internet, speed, through AT&T or Spectrum or whoever your provider is. And now you'll be able to do that with fellow companies to have the privilege of being on your your internet service. And you can also now charge people for that convenience of now saying, well, if you want to have great streaming service and you want to have Netflix, that's not our company. You're gonna have to pay as a consumer X amount of money to be able to use Netflix on our, Spectrum cable or AT&T or direct, whoever you're getting your.
So it could
your
cost a lot
wireless
more
provider.
to watch quality after shows on
Absolutely.
YouTube. See,
Yes.
that's something that people should take very seriously. I mean, what do you do at this point? I mean, you just try and yell about it. I mean,
Well, the best. I mean, and just saying the best correlation to kind of look at is you can see what happened in Portugal when they kind of did a similar thing, and you can see what happened for consumers there. If you're curious, you can kind of see what happened and how people ended up having to pay for services. We did have quite a few states today that said they were going to be filing lawsuits to keep net neutrality in place, and so I think it's going to be a longer process. I think the issue with the FCC, and it's always been difficult, even on being, when it's Democratic controlled or Republican controlled, is that it's tied to whatever administration is in power, which they always claim, well, that's what the voters' intention was. But however, you do not vote for any of those FCC committee people and the governors, and they're making decisions that affect every single American, but yet they're never voted on. And that, to me, feels like an issue. Even if you agree or disagree with their policies, when it flips back to Democratic control, there'll be a lot of people who feel like, well, it feels like people should have a right to have a say on who these people are, and that they should be answerable to the American people rather than serving at the pleasure of a president who's in power, who's going to pick who they want. And a 3-2 vote today doesn't make you feel confident knowing that it's completely on party lines today.
And there's the other part of that is elections have consequences, and this is what happens when you don't go out to vote, and people get to put in place. I won't say so. Put a pin in what I just said, because we do know that Barack Obama appointed Ajit Patel to that seat, and I'm sure you guys talked about it on the show when you talked about this. The only reason that Barack Obama put him on that commission seat was because Republicans controlled the Congress at the time, and Mitch McConnell said, "This is who I want," and there was not much that Barack Obama could do in that sense. So I know some people out there are trying to say, well, this was Barack Obama's. I mean, even Don Jr. just tweeted it. Oh, well, Obama's FCC chairman. And I'm like, he was not Barack Obama's.
He was not his FCC chairman. That was elevated when Trump came in, and also you have to have a certain number of Republicans, a certain number of Democrats. When you're the party in control, you get the majority. But you have to always balance it out. So if a Republican left, you essentially have to put in another Republican there to keep it 3-2 in the case when Obama's running, and vice versa. So Trump would also have to make sure that there's Democrats in there as well. You can't just have it 5-0. But it does lead the question that, yes, he did put him in there, but like you said, elections do have consequences, and too many times, even when you do go out to vote, you're voting on one particular issue, but you're not thinking about all of these ancillary things that come up, like the FCC and other things that you might care about, but you were so focused on, Hillary Clinton's emails that you weren't thinking, like, if Trump gets in, that these other things are going to happen that you may not agree with. And that's part of the problem, like you said, that happens when people don't think about the other things that will happen.
There's a spirited debate in the chat right now.
I'm watching.
Drexel,
I can't read it.
Where did
My
you
eyes are too old.
Drexel, where did you get this scarf?
It was a gift.
Okay.
And it's blue.
Is it? Oh, yes, I guess it is. Yeah.
So,
It's like
because
the dress
my
thing.
bosses got us all like infinity scarf, and I was wearing it because it is a little chilly in Los Angeles.
I know people.
Yes, it's
people
79 degrees now. It dropped below 80.
To be fair, right now it's probably in like the low 60s, high 50s.
Yeah, and
so
I usually
scarf weather.
I usually sit at my desk
Okay.
with a fan blowing in my
stretching
face
that.
anyway.
Yeah.
And it's really cold in my office, so I pretty much didn't. I mean, I don't like to have to take things off. But yeah, it was a gift, and my bosses know that I wear a lot of blue, so they wanted to get me something that matched a lot of the stuff that I wear in general, and that's what happened. And plus, it's very Democrat. It's Democrat
Yes,
blue.
it is. That's
It's a little celebratory scarf.
Yeah.
I don't know where they got it from. I don't know. I could not tell you.
All right, we're sorry. Well, shareable Texas, you're gonna have to find that scarf on your own. One of the the story that I woke up to this morning, my little alert, was that Disney has bought parts of Fox, and betraying the huge nerd that is underneath this blazer, who, by the way, Monday nights is one of the hosts of Marvel TV Weekly here on AfterBuzz. Super excited at the idea that we can get a movie with the Avengers and the X-Men in it now. Beyond that, I'm sure there's a million bad reasons, but that reason, I'm like, hey, that ain't all bad. I'm okay with that. In fact, Chris Evans tweeted last week that it means that there could be a movie where he plays the Human Torch, who he played in the Fantastic Four movies, and Captain America. He could be a buddy comedy with himself.
But okay, so my question, I know that obviously we talk politics on this show.
Yeah, but
however,
this does factor in eventually.
My question about that, I did not grow up with the Avengers. I grew up with DC. Like, I'm a Justice League fan. I have not seen the new Justice League movie yet.
I haven't either.
Because I don't
Save
want
for
to be
$12.
I don't want to be super disappointed, so I might
You
just
won't
watch
be.
it at home.
No, honestly, you won't be super disappointed. It's fun, but it's not
I have
great.
Movie Pass, so I won't be paying much
Oh,
anyway.
that's perfect. You'll definitely enjoy it.
Yeah.
With Movie Pass, you'll
I'll
enjoy it.
definitely
Yeah.
do it. So my question is, the Avengers and Justice League movies like that feel so packed.
They're exhausting.
With people.
Yeah.
To add another layer of X-Men into the
Great.
Avengers
Just
sounds way too way too much happening.
Hey, make the movie 4 hours. I'm fine. I'm in. It does it 5 hours. Whatever. I have no problem.
5 hours.
But it does beg the question that, Disney, the Mouse House, in recent years has acquired Star Wars, Marvel Comics. I don't even know what else. But, by acquiring all these things, now they have Fox. I don't feel so good about that. I mean, it's, look, it's an entertainment company. It's not a utility company. It's not a cell phone company. But at the same time, to me, this strikes me as the exact kind of monopoly you don't want. Right. I think you want this company to be 5 or 6 different companies, that create different content, and instead of sort of streamlining everything and
or streaming in Disney's
or
case.
Streaming, which you'll have to pay extra for because of that neutrality. So,
but that's all. That was Disney's goal. Like their goal, Disney has not made a live action movie that has been successful in a long time, other than the Marvel movies. Which, if you look at, if you take Marvel out, Disney is only successful at animated movies.
Yeah, I mean, if you think about it, and again, this is hardly political, but I mean, Disney abandoned the Chronicles of Narnia series because like the first one did pretty well, and then that was the last like big foray that I can think of. I'm sure there's something else, but
Disney could have done a really big Christian push for Chronicles. No, seriously.
I mean, they should
for Chronicles of Narnia.
Because,
they just didn't do that.
You mean with the Jesus Lion? Yeah, they should.
Right. That's what I meant. Like they just did not target that audience. But the other part of that is, Disney taking over Fox, which does a lot. Fox Searchlight, which does a lot of really Shape of Water. The Billboard movie that just came out.
3
Billboards outside Ebbing,
Fox
Missouri.
as well. So Fox does those type of movies. Disney might not be able to do those type of movies, but I think there's going to be a lot of jobs lost over on the Fox
There will
lot.
be a lot of jobs lost, especially in the movie side of things.
Because they're already talking about
redundancies.
savings.
Yeah.
They're already talking about $2 billion or whatever in savings.
Yes.
And that's where the jobs are coming from.
From the movie side, for sure.
But I think that the Disney's end goal was not about the quality of movies, was about knowing that people were going to come to them anyway. And that they can now take all of their movies off of Netflix and then create their own streaming service and then put it all there. So now we're not only paying for Netflix, but just as now we're paying for all of this, just like we pay for CBS All Access so we can watch Star Trek.
Yes.
And that's what's going to end up happening. And we're for families, $10 is a lot lot of money.
Oh, it adds up.
It
Absolutely.
adds up if you have to pay for 10. Netflix, which just went up by $1.
I saw that.
CBS, which is now which is probably going to go up next year, and then of course it's Disney streaming service. So I think that's what people
and also the market share that they're going to have now is going to be something like 40%. Of this company, and it's kind of the same thing that Comcast did when they acquired NBC Universal, and they get the theme parks, and so these are the two companies that are sort of trying to rival each other for the biggest entertainment conglomerate, and it doesn't help the everyday American or the consumer. And you're right, on the movie side of things, the redundancies are going to be a lot, so there's going to be a lot of job loss. A lot of people looking for work. TV side will fare a little bit better because they have enough separation, and Fox has a lot of different shows and productions, so that'll be a little bit better. But it is a little bit scary when you see these huge conglomerates that have way too much money and power, and now lobbying power when you talk about politics, of being able to have a bigger say in what laws and legislation is passed for them, and what's going to be friendly for them, as we already see with their theme parks and what they've managed to do in like Orlando, my hometown, and basically had a whole government district made for them that they have a lot of power and control over.
Celebration.
So you see that, and it doesn't help the average American. And again, that's where I don't understand how the everyday Republican feels that Republicans in power are looking after their interests when they're looking after businesses' best interest by giving them more power and less from the everyday American consumer or American worker.
And it's interesting to think, for all of the cord cutters who were so happy, and we'll probably look back and when everybody had $100 cable bill or satellite bill, you're actually spending less money than with all these services that are going to add up. Obviously the cable bill is not structured very family friendly in any way. But you're going to end up spending more with all these things.
Where we start breaking it out to $10 here, $10 there for different services to be able to have that. Yeah, it's going to be very quick.
And, you'll still need some kind of over-the-air television service because, people who want to watch live events.
Internet, right?
You got to see
we already have pay-per-view.
Yeah,
you got to have internet to be able to wireless or internet or some way to be able to get all that stuff.
I mean, I'm a big Disney fan. I mean, if you live in Southern California, chances are you have an annual pass, and Tim and I love going to Disneyland. We just were there last Friday, but at the same time, you started over the past few years, you started to see where Disney's is getting a little greedy. Not that they always haven't been, but a little bit more in how they managed what they were doing with Coco. So Coco was a great movie. So if you haven't seen it, go see it because it's really great. You could learn a lot if you're a Republican. But there was a moment where there was a point where Disney tried to purchase Dios de los Muertos, the Day of the Dead, the Spanish term for Day of the Dead. They wanted to keep it because was the original title of Coco. So they wanted to capitalize off of a term.
They wanted to basically trademark it. Yeah,
that a term that people have been using for years.
Centuries, yeah, basically.
And so that if they had won that would just open the floodgates.
Yeah, no, I mean, and that's exactly the
Mm-hmm.
same idea that, for all the advantages for maybe shareholders and things, the idea that these companies are getting so big, I think doesn't really benefit any of us.
No.
Quick comment from the chat. Tammy Govia says, first time tuning in and loving the Trump report. Thanks, gentlemen. Usually there's ladies here on the panel, at least one, but we did throw this together sort of last minute because we were a little excited to talk Alabama. But speaking of ladies, Omarosa, this will be our final topic. I'm sure we're pretty much out of time, Anthony. But Omarosa, apparently hearing, as she heard during the course of the Apprentice, you're fired. Now, she said that she did not take wedding photos inside the residence, but then that means she took them like in the Oval Office. She was a very calculated response. It's like, I did not take those pictures in the residence.
I didn't hear that the pictures were taken in the residence. I heard that the pictures were taken in the White House in general.
Yes.
Yeah, so
who takes their photos in the White House when you're not a kid of the President of the United States?
Yeah, exactly. But I don't even know that that's what it was. But just quick little round table. We'll go through. Scott, you'll be second after me. Anybody surprised that this didn't work out? Because I'm not. Omarosa working at the White House.
No, actually, in fact, I thought she was already gone. It reminded me that she wasn't. I was like, oh, she is still there because I thought it was sort of, we'd heard rumors they were on the outs a couple months ago, so not surprised. And then all the gossip about her being like dragged out, and it was really good. It was good reading. But no, not surprised.
I'm not surprised.
In fact, I'm surprised it lasted as long as it did.
I'm surprised that there are black people working in the White House.
That too.
General.
Well, there's one less.
Yeah.
But I will say, Omarosa did say on Good, amid all the crazy stuff. First of all, she tried to go after April Ryan, like stealthily on Good Morning America this morning. But she did say like, there's a lot of stuff that happened in the White House that disturbed me, and I was like, do tell.
Well, I know, right? Let's just
Do
tell all book from
tell.
her.
I was
I'm
gonna
waiting
say,
for that.
she's like, well, buy my book.
Right. And that's what Robin Roberts said at the end of her segment, where she was like, "Bye, Felicia." And the African American women on TV, from April Ryan to Robin Roberts to Angela Rye to Simone Sanders, these prominent black women in politics are like I'm ready to see what Michelle Obama has to say. Like, please say something, because I want to know what Michelle Obama really thinks about Omarosa.
I think we all do,
Yes.
and we'll find out.
Maybe she can come on the Trump. Maybe she can come on Political Beat.
And then stay for
Stick around.
Don't worry.
Just
yes,
stick around.
which is
We can-
immediately after.
No problem. We can share the guests.
Yes, we can absolutely. I'd love to
I
have
know
her.
I said there's our final topic, but it's a great question in the chat. Jordan in the chat, simple question. What percentage do you give for this tax reform passing? Me personally, 90%. But I'm a huge pessimist, and I thought that Roy Moore was going to be a senator. Scott, what do you think?
Probably close to 70%. Because I think they're going to do whatever they can to try to ram it through to get some kind of credit for this year, and they got already close enough that they're basically
All right,
there.
Drexel, are you going to offer people some hope?
I said about 60%. I think that Susan Collins is going to end up doing the right thing. I think that that Bob Corker is conservative enough to think that there's too much in the bill. We haven't really heard from Rand Paul either.
Yeah.
And I think that the CHIP program is something that Lisa Murkowski might take a look at and say, well, we got to get this. We got to get some funding for this, even though she got funding for her drilling. Mm-hmm. And that's another thing. The fact that Lisa Murkowski, or a Republican, is prioritizing drilling in the Arctic over children tells you a lot about the Republican Party.
Right.
Well, and she's also prioritizing drilling of baby seals. So you see, it just all comes together, because who knows what's in there. Whatever it is, it's probably delicious. Anyway, for real, this is our last show for 2017. Mostly because, I guess the studio is open next week. So, you never know. It's something crazy.
Trump could resign. I've been waiting for it.
We will really be back on January 9th. Yeah, I almost said 8th, and I'm like, that's not the right day. January 9th. And we will see everyone then. But thanks so much to the panel, Scott Moore at S-Man80, Drexel Hurd at Drexel Hurd, and Political Beat will be back the same night, right?
Same night.
So, all right, so January 9th we'll be back. But, there is no war on Christmas. Merry Christmas! But also happy holidays.
Happy
Kwanzaa.
Happy Hanukkah right now.
And of course, Happy New Year.
Yes.
Thanks so much to everybody who joins us in the chat week after week, and we'll see you in the new year. Oh, and of course, thanks to Anthony in the booth at Tony B. Dead, Tony B. D-E-D. So there you go. There's a Christmas present. I don't have to buy anything now, Anthony. We will see you in the new year. Thanks, everyone.
Bye.
From executive producers Maria Menounos, Kevin Undergaro, Phil Svitek, and the entire AfterBuzz TV staff, we would like to thank you for listening to the AfterBuzz TV network. To watch or listen to other after shows and post comments or questions, be sure to visit AfterBuzzTV.com. I'm Sir Richard Wentworth, and this has been a presentation of AfterBuzz TV.
Buzz you later.
The views expressed herein are those of the hosts only and do not necessarily reflect the views of AfterBuzz TV or its owners or principals.